Imagine a world where ice was more valuable than gold, where only the richest households could afford a chilled drink, and the very idea of frozen food belonged to fantasy. That world existed not long ago, a time when keeping things cold required nature as help, human endurance, and a touch of madness. But behind your modern refrigerator lies one of the strangest, most revolutionary stories in history. A story of obsessions, explosions, and accidental genius. It begins long before electricity, long before compressors or Freon, in a world where cold was something to be hunted, not created. In the early 1800s, cold wasn't a machine's output, it was ice, harvested by hand from frozen lakes. Men would travel across New England's frozen ponds with saws and horses, cutting huge blocks of ice and shipping them thousands of miles away, even as far as India. Imagine that. Ships full of ice crossing the equator, wrapped in sawdust to slow the melt. This frozen water trade, as it was called, was the empire of one man, Frederick Tudor, the so-called Ice King of Boston. People thought he was insane. Who would buy ice in tropical countries? Yet Tudor's vision was bold. He convinced the world that ice wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. By the mid-19th century, his business had turned frozen water into an international commodity, chilling drinks and preserving meats from Havana to Bombay. But his success also revealed a massive limitation. What happens when there is no ice to cut? That's where science stepped in. As the Industrial Revolution took hold, a few restless minds began wondering, could cold be manufactured? Could humans, with enough mechanical genius, create winter on demand? The first man to try was William Cullen, a Scottish physician who, in 1748, made water freeze inside a laboratory using nothing but vacuum pumps and ethyl ether. But Cullen didn't see any practical use for his discovery. He merely recorded the experiment and moved on. A century later, Haco Perkins, an American inventor living in England, built the first working refrigerator. His design, patented in 1834, used compressed ether to absorb heat and release it. Elsewhere, the basic principle of modern refrigeration. Yet his invention was too dangerous and too inefficient to use widely. The ether gas was highly flammable, and early systems had a tendency to leak with explosive results. Perkins' refrigerator worked, but it terrified everyone who saw it. Enter James Harrison, an Australian newspaper printer with a stubborn streak. In the 1850s, while cleaning his printing presses with ether, he noticed that the liquid evaporated quickly, cooling the metal surfaces. That tiny observation sparked an idea. What if he could use that cooling effect on a larger scale? Harrison designed a vapor compression system that could freeze water and preserve meat. Soon, his ice machines were powering breweries and meatpacking plants across Australia. The age of industrial refrigeration had begun, but refrigeration didn't become truly global until one problem was solved: how to make it safe. Early refrigerants were deadly ether. Ammonia and sulfur dioxide could kill if inhaled or leaked. One wrong move, and your kitchen could become a chemical hazard zone. Scientists raced to find a new gas, one that was stable, efficient, and safe for homes. In 1928, Thomas Midgley Jr., working for General Motors, introduced Freon, a chlorofluorocarbon that changed everything. Refrigeration became clean, quiet, and accessible, but also, as we now know, devastating to the ozone layer. Ironically, Midgley's invention, hailed as a miracle, would later be condemned as one of the most destructive chemicals ever created. But at the time, it ushered in a revolution. By the 1930s, refrigerators became status symbols, gleaming boxes of modernity sitting proudly in middle-class kitchens. Cold became democracy, no longer the privilege of the rich, but a convenience for everyone. The psychological impact of refrigeration was profound. For centuries, humans had lived in rhythm with decay. Food spoiled quickly, meat had to be salted or smoked, and milk lasted only a day. Suddenly, that changed. The refrigerator didn't just cool, it altered our relationship with time. We began to live in a world of delayed consumption, where freshness could be preserved and waste reduced. Psychologists later called it the illusion of permanence. Cold gave us control over impermanence, a kind of everyday magic. But here's where the story gets even stranger. While Western scientists were building machines, ancient civilizations had already mastered natural cooling centuries before. In Persia, engineers built Yaxel's massive clay domes that stored ice through the blazing desert summer, using ingenious, evaporative cooling systems. In ancient India, people used double clay pots and underground storage to chill water long before thermodynamics had a name. Even the Romans stored snow in deep pits covered with straw, serving icy drinks to their elite guests under the Mediterranean sun. Modern refrigeration, then Wasanti, an invention born from nowhere. It was the culmination of humanity, its eternal obsession with defying heat. What the ancients achieved with earth, wind, and geometry, the industrial age replicated with metal, gas, and pressure. Yet refrigeration didn't just change how we ate. It transformed how we lived. Urbanization, global trade, and even migration patterns were influenced by the ability to preserve food. Without refrigeration, supermarkets wouldn't exist. Cities wouldn't sustain millions of residents. Hospitals couldn't store vaccines. The modern world, quite literally, is built on the power to keep things cold. But there's a darker, often overlooked side to this convenience. As refrigeration spread, it reshaped global diets, extending the reach of meat, dairy, and processed foods, while disconnecting people from seasonal, local eating. It also contributed massively to climate change. Those humming machines in every home, factory, and grocery store consume staggering amounts of energy. And the coolants once hailed as miracles, from Freon to its successors, have left a scar on our atmosphere. In 1985, scientists discovered the ozone hole over Antarctica, directly linked to CFC emissions from refrigerators and air conditioners. The world panicked. Within 2 years, nations signed the Montreal Protocol, agreeing to phase out the chemicals that were eating our sky. It was one of humanity's rare moments of collective environmental success, proof that we could fix what we broke. Still, the story didn't end there. The search for the perfect cold continues. From liquid nitrogen cryogenics to quantum cooling in computer labs, humanity's quest for lower temperatures has become more philosophical than practical. Scientists are now reaching temperatures within billionths of a degree from absolute zero, where atoms barely move and time itself seems to slow. The cold that once preserved our food is now unlocking the secrets of the universe. But perhaps the most poetic twist is this. Cold, once a symbol of hardship and death, has become a symbol of comfort and progress. For early humans, winter meant danger. For us it means convenience. A chilled drink, an air-conditioned room, a frost-lined freezer. We've turned the enemy into a servant. And yet, deep down, that mastery comes with irony. Every time we open a refrigerator door, we release a little warmth into the world. Cooling one small box in our kitchen means heating the planet ever so slightly outside. The cycle never ends, an invisible reminder that nothing is truly free from consequence. From frozen ponds to compressor coils, from Persian ice houses to sleek stainless steel fridges. The story of refrigeration is really the story of human persistence, our refusal to accept nature's limits. It's the history of people who saw melting ice, not as a tragedy, but as an invitation to invent. The next time you grab a cold drink or open your freezer for ice cream, remember the chain of hands, minds, and risks that made that moment possible. From Tudor's frozen lakes to Harrison's ether coils from Mead, Freon to the scientists now racing to undo his legacy. Refrigeration isn't just a machine. It's a quiet revolution, humming in every home, whispering the same defiant promise that humanity can make even the fleeting stay fresh. Flashback Facts, uncovering the hidden cool behind the everyday.